You are listening to Action Design, your monthly insight into the field of behavioral economics and its applications to the world around us. We bring you leading practitioners from all industries to discuss cutting-edge behavioral research and how to practically apply those concepts to the development of consumer products and public policy.
Hello and welcome to Action Design Radio. I'm your host, Zarak Khan. Joining me, as always, Eric Johnson.
Hello and happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays!
Ho, ho, ho.
And for the holidays, we have a special episode on giving gifts, how to give the perfect gift. This is how a behavioral scientist gives a gift. And to help us answer that question, we have with us Jacob Mohrmann, who is the Research and Insights Manager for a company called, is it Maritz? How do I pronounce it? I'm kidding. It's where I work too. Jacob's on my team. Jacob works at Maritz, managing our research database and insights. Jacob, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So before we jump in, Jacob, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, what you do on the team.
Yeah, so at Maritz, I do a lot of different behavioral science research-based stuff. And when I was starting out, a lot of that consisted of just reading tons of different research papers and different behavioral science sites and things like that, just to build up a database that I built that has different principles and things they might apply to and the studies that go with those. And then now a lot of it consists of people asking me questions about what behavioral science we have on a specific topic, or when they're approaching a problem, how we could bake behavioral science into the stuff that they're working on.
And I would say, also interestingly, you're the chief marketing officer of a startup called Gift Meal, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Cool. Well, we have a question about how to apply behavioral insights to a specific topic.
Perfect.
So it sounds like you're the perfect person for us. So, Jacob, how do you give the perfect gift when you're thinking about this? What should people be thinking about in terms of the gift itself, how they present the gift? Any kind of insights you have there would be much appreciated by our listeners.
Yeah. So there's definitely a lot of different research that relates to gifts. I don't think there's necessarily one perfect answer to what the perfect gift is, but one thing that jumps out immediately to me is just, I know a lot of people, when they're giving gifts, they put a lot of thought into it and they have different reasons why they give the gift that they do. And one interesting study I saw was about how a lot of times the recipient doesn't understand all of the thought that went into the gift, but since you're the person giving it, you think oh, they must know why I'm giving this, so I don't have to explain it, but there's kind of a disconnect there. And so a recommendation there would be to include a note or say something as you're giving the gift to explain why you gave the gift and the thought that went into it. So an example of this for me is one time I gave my mom a gift, and it was I gave her a normal gift, and then I also donated to this place called Village Enterprises on her behalf. And it was because she was just working on starting her own elder care business. And so Village Enterprises is a nonprofit that helps people in rural Africa start their own women-owned businesses. So I thought that was a connect there. But if I just said I'm donating to this thing, then she'd be oh, cool. But she might not understand why it actually happened. So I think that's one that can apply to everything. A lot of as far as the type of gift, there's a lot of happy money principles that I know you and me, Zarak, have talked a lot about and talked a lot about at Maritz. But that covers a lot of things like buying experiences versus material goods. A lot of studies show that if you give somebody money and tell them to spend it on an experience versus a material good, they end up being happier. Spending it on others versus yourself. It was a similar type of experiment. And then another interesting category that isn't the first thing that comes to mind is buying time, which is buying, whether it be something like a TaskRabbit type thing where you pay and then somebody comes and does a task for you to save time, or a cleaning service or anything like that. that tends to make people happier, but a lot of times people don't estimate how much happiness they'll get from it. So those are a few different categories that might apply under it. One other interesting thing that I think about a lot is I think some people find it a little taboo to just give somebody what they asked for or like ask them what they want. But there have been a series of studies that showed that a lot of times, like this applies especially during things unlike the holiday that we're in now, but like things like a wedding registry and things like that. A lot of times people are like, well, I know what they really want. They want a Dutch oven. Like I have one and it's great, but they probably would have put that on their registry or asked for it if they wanted it. So like a lot of happiness is actually gained from giving somebody something that they specifically want, which people often don't feel comfortable doing. But I think that's one interesting aspect of the research as well.
Yeah, those are all great tips. I mean, I think when I was like a little kid, I think I didn't really appreciate like cards like that are associated with gifts. It's just like, just get me to whatever this thing is. And
Right,
now, yeah, I like much more appreciate kind of like the sentiment behind why did somebody choose this? Was there like the thought that went into it? So yeah, I love that. And then yeah, my family kind of experimented with this. Well, not experimented, but we did this a couple years ago. We just sort of said specifically like, this is what I want, because I think what we found is like everyone was kind of giving people things that like nobody really wanted, right? It was sort of like, oh, like,
Yeah.
you know, my grandmother would give me something that was sort of like a jokey thing that's like, okay, like it's a funny joke and like I like it, but you know, I'm not really going to use this. You know, I would get, you know, somebody in my family something that's like, all right, this sort of, it almost sort of was just revealed that like, okay, Zarak just doesn't really know what I what I like.
Yeah.
And so we tried this out of like everyone just sort of pick, you know, here's the stuff that you're looking for. And yeah, I mean, I would say I, you know, after that, the holiday like had, you know, a bunch of books that I'd been wanting, a bunch of other things. It was like, oh, this is perfect. I wasn't going to get this stuff for myself, and now I have it, and from people that I love. And yeah, I did appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I think there's another interesting element with that too, because you talked about the experiences and how we tend to be more satisfied by experiences. And like, I think part of it when you get a gift has been an experience is that when you're doing it, you're like, oh, like I'm doing this cool thing because of my friend or my family member or whoever it is. I think that same sort of concept applies to buying something people like actually want or that's more practical in a way, because they're going to use it more, and whenever they use it, like the person who gave them the gift will be kind of top of mind,
right.
as opposed to giving something that's sort of unique and might be funny and exciting when you open it, but then you never really touch it again, like something that you actually are going to use often, like you will always associate that thing with the person. Is that kind of accurate, and why maybe looking at some of the underlying reasons that might be more useful?
For sure. I think that's definitely true. And then also, like some people might say, oh, well, you know, if it's something they want, they could just buy it for themselves. But there also is the like pain of paying component where you might not want to get something for yourself or like go through some of that pain of paying when you purchase something for yourself. But when you're given it as a gift, there's no like guilt associated with it if it's like something that you normally wouldn't want to treat yourself to. It's kind of in a separate category when you get it as a gift, so you can enjoy it and appreciate it even more than if you were to just go buy it yourself.
Yeah, it's definitely like that's a criteria that I kind of think of when I'm getting a gift. Is like, I think a good gift is something that I would not have gotten for myself. And so, no, I do appreciate that.
One thing I was kind of thinking of as I was prepping like research this conversation is like, and especially I thought of this when we thought of like the practicality point, like it's something what people want. I think another thing that I feel like can be kind of taboo in lots of instances is like gift cards. And it's interesting for me to think about, and I'd be curious to hear your guys' thoughts. Like from a pure like economic standpoint, you think like a gift card's almost the best thing because then you can just go get whatever you want. But I was thinking about like, for one, it sort of lacks the thoughtfulness a little bit, where it's like, well, I know you broadly want something in this category, but I didn't really feel like putting the effort in figuring out what that was. So you can go do it yourself. It also removes some of that, like you said, that joy of like, oh, I like this thing, and I wouldn't have necessarily bought it for myself. Now you're kind of like putting the effort of finding the thing that they end up buying on them rather than on you. So I'm interested in thoughts on gift cards and how you feel.
Yeah, so I would definitely agree. I think there is kind of a sense that it's more like, I think of it on the relational and transactional continuum, like it does seem a little more like you're giving somebody cash. I think it's more removed than if you just gave somebody money and you're like, oh, look, you can buy whatever you want. Here's $25 or whatever it is that you're giving. It does kind of depend. Like, for example, for me, I usually give my grandpa just a gift card to McDonald's because that's like the one place he consistently goes and will spend money. And I've done other things in the past, but sometimes I do get the sense that it's just like, oh, thanks for this. But then it's like, oh, he's just going to put that away and never see it again. So I think
you could argue McDonald's is an experience though. It's going on.
Yeah. So I think part of that does too depend on, the person and the type of person, as all of these things do. And if it's like something that, like, to a place that they really want to go and that they'll use. I was actually just talking this to Laurel, who's on our team, and she was talking about how, like, when you get a gift card, sometimes if it's a place that you wouldn't normally go, it's like, oh, it kind of gets added to the to-do list of like, I really need to go use this card and remember to use it, versus if you get it to some place that you're going to be all the time, then like at least you like know you're going to use it, like you're going to have it out. It's not like it gets added to your mental list. And that's kind of how it works for me, is I have like a drawer of gift cards we got from like our wedding or whatever different events, and I always forget to use them, and then I get back from the place even, I'm just like, damn, I didn't use that gift card. And it becomes kind of like a frustrating thing for me personally.
Now you feel guilty.
I don't know. I don't know if that's like a similar experience for other people, but there is like some component of that stuff that I think it depends on like the person and where it is and all those different things.
Yeah.
Well, I also think that there's sort of like a balance, and I'd be interested to get your guys' take on this too, of essentially like thinking about yourself as the giver and then thinking about the recipient, right? And so in a way, like, giving sort of a non-specific gift, or like, I mean, like I've definitely also received some things where it's like, okay, someone has given me a gift where it's like, this is really just kind of like you wanted to give this and you didn't really care that like I don't want this at all. Like you kind of know that I don't want it and you're giving it to me anyway.
Like you Googled coolest Christmas gifts of 2019 and just like picked one off the list for me.
Right. So, I think it's like, well, in that case, and maybe the gift card's kind of like this too, like, it allows the gift giver to feel good that they're like giving you something, but it doesn't necessarily like correspond to like the recipient feeling good. And there's other things like this too, right? Where a lot of times people, we think about this a lot at Maritz, right? People say like, oh, I just want cash, but then they have, they appreciate it more after the fact if you give them something else, right? If you give them experience as opposed to that. I mean, that's kind of like core to a lot of what Maritz has done for decades. So, in giving gifts, like I think I tried to kind of err a little bit more on the side of, or not even err, I would say I focus more on the side of like what the person that's receiving this is going to feel, as opposed to sort of what I feel as giving them a gift. And then hopefully that's like that they enjoy it and that makes me feel good. But I don't know, like how you all kind of balance this stuff, when you're thinking about giving gifts.
Yeah. So do you mean like from the giver's standpoint that like what type of way would they feel like they're giving something that they would want, or that they just want to give because they find it interesting, or what's your
Yeah,
thought
I mean, I guess it could be either of those, or maybe not necessarily because they find it interesting, but some out of some like sense of, like you feel a little bit obligated, like, well, okay, I need to give a gift to everyone in the family, so I'm going to just give this person, I don't know, I'll just pick this thing here. And they're satisfying their own kind of need to sort of feel like, oh, I've done my part here and I've given a gift.
Oh, so like the checklist of, well, Zarak gets me a gift, so I need to get him one.
Right.
Or
right.
So they just find something that works.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I feel like there's like somewhat of a similarity where like, yeah, because I think like it's kind of like putting yourself in the shoes of the person who's receiving it and not using your own interests, because there are like selfish interests with giving gifts. Like kind of like we talked about, you might want to give something that's a surprise and really creative, and that's cool and thoughtful, but no one uses it. They never use it after they open it. Like a similar thing could be along those lines. Like you get something that's like trendy and maybe like expensive because you want to show off that you can like afford buying this gift, or that you're like in the know of these cool things, when it's just not something that the other person cares about at all. So you're kind of like stroking your own ego rather than actually giving a gift that the person is looking forward to receiving or will use.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, so, oh, sorry, go ahead, Jacob.
Oh, I was just gonna say this is kind of related, but when I was a little kid, I gave my dad FIFA 98 on N64, and I was like, "Look, Dad, it's because you like soccer." And then I was just like, "Zoink!" And then just like went downstairs and played it.
Another facet is giving a gift you know they won't use, because then you can use it.
Right.
I was like, "Oh, do you want to go play with me?"
Yeah, let's go play it right now. I'm super excited.
Obviously, the adult version of that is a little less obvious, but
Yeah. It's like, oh, here's a nice bottle of wine, when they don't actually drink wine.
You're
Like,
like,
oh,
you
I'll
don't drink?
take it off your
Oh.
hands. Let's open it right now. All right.
Yeah.
Let's celebrate.
So I think that there's like a number of like good tips in here for folks, right? So I think some of the ones that we've heard are sort of, provide some reasoning, whether in a card or, explanation of why you've chosen this thing, just to kind of highlight the thought and that went into this, because people won't see that otherwise, and they might not necessarily infer all the things that you're thinking. Focusing on these sort of happy money principles, which we probably credit Elizabeth Dunn and Michael Norton with that. So their book Happy Money talks about a lot of these things. But
That book would make a great gift for the behavioral scientist in your life.
That's right. Yeah, it will help whoever you give a better gift to you next year. So focusing on experiences over things, helping people reclaim time for themselves to do things that they enjoy by giving them a gift that eliminates something that they don't like doing, that takes up time for them. And then I kind of wanted to close, Jacob, since I have you here, if you can talk a little bit just about, this is such a core element of a lot of what Maritz does. I'm interested to get your take on just how we sort of incorporate this into the business, right? Because we have a lot of a big like rewards team and function where, our clients send gifts essentially to their customers or their employees to motivate or to celebrate them in different ways. So, I know that you work really closely with some folks on that team. So I'm wondering if you can just kind of like describe sort of the ways in which we are sort of thinking about that and applying that.
Yeah, for sure. So that is the reason that I've got so many of these principles in my head and assembled. I was actually thinking of it when we were talking about like the non-cash and gift cards versus cash discussion, just because that's something that we think about a lot at Maritz. There's a lot of studies on performance when using non-cash versus cash. And a lot of the studies show that people, when asked, would say that they would prefer to be paid in cash. But when you have a group that receives like a non-cash reward versus a cash reward, the non-cash group often outperforms the cash group. And that's been conducted in like call centers and other work environments, as well as a lot of lab experiments. And as far as the different categories and everything, that's something that we try to incorporate a lot, is we want to go beyond just having like basic merchandise items that you can redeem for, and then within merchandise focusing on like more hedonic or luxury rewards versus just a utilitarian. We use the toaster for an example a lot of times, is you don't want to just have like the toaster as a reward option, but have something that somebody would treat themselves to that they wouldn't normally feel comfortable buying for themselves on their own. So then when they earn points through a thing, they're like, oh, I'm going to reward myself with this really nice thing that I've been wanting, but I wouldn't just go and spend my own money for it. But then taking it beyond that to like having opportunities for different experiences and travel, and then like time and charity options and things like that is something we try to focus on a lot to take it beyond just those like basic toaster type rewards.
Yeah, I think it's really cool the way that you all put that into both like sort of the choice set around like types of gifts or rewards, as well as kind of the process too, right? So like the ways in which that's communicated, that to me that sounds like analogous to explaining the thought that goes into it. You're sort of saying like, here's why we think this, whether even if it's still like, an item or merchandise or whatever, it could be, this is something that we think is time saving and we think that that's important and would benefit you. So it's, kind of a cool way of incorporating behavioral science into the choice around the gifts, as well as, sort of the presentation or the communication around that too.
Yeah. The rewards team has definitely done a good job of that, because buying time, like you said, it doesn't have to just be like a cleaning voucher or something like that. It could also be like a Roomba saves you time on like vacuuming and things like that. So it doesn't have to be a non-merchandise item. There are like more experiential merchandise and more time-saving merchandise and things like that. And then even some merchandise that has like a give back component to it. I know that they've kind of highlighted in a section with the charity donation options. So they've really built that into explaining that piece of the merchandise items.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us, sharing your research and insights that you're managing. And yeah, hopefully this is helpful for action designers out there as they're looking for and thinking about gifts for the holidays.
I mean, I'm personally going gift shopping tonight, so this is perfect timing.
Wow, great priming for you too, yeah.
Thank God we did this today and not tomorrow.
Awesome. All right, well, thanks very much, and we'll see you next time.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you for listening. That concludes this edition of Action Design Radio, hosted by Eric Johnson and Zarak Khan. All podcast episodes are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and many other platforms where you might typically get your pod on. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Special thanks to Morgan Bortz for design, and as always, we would like to recognize Steve Wendell, founder of the Action Design Network, a nonprofit organization dedicated to spreading awareness about behavioral economics, psychology, and all things behavioral science in order to help you improve your life, your career, and your understanding of the world around us and the people in it. I am your producer and audio engineer, Zach Simon. For more cutting-edge behavioral science content, visit action-design.org. Once again, that's action-design.org. There, you can sign up for our newsletter and find an in-person event happening near you. We have chapters in over a dozen cities in the United States and Canada. Also, on our website, you can find additional notes and links regarding the topics discussed in today's episode. Thank you again for tuning in, and we will see you again soon.